Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. What you're about to experience today is focused on one of the most volatile, misunderstood, but passionate issue that affects the poor, and it affects the perception of homelessness, and that's mental health. And so the truth behind mental health and homelessness, which comes first, that's the key question for all of you to get an understanding of today. It's not as easy as cart and horse, and you're going to find out today. So let me introduce you to the moderator of our panel, a gentleman that we're so blessed to have. And when you hear his credentials, you'll know why. And I'm cutting this in half because I could spend the next hour talking about Martel's experience. But Martel Akanji has over 15 years of robust experience working with communities, administrators, and legislatures in the fields of juvenile justice, public health, and education.
I'm so excited and so grateful to be in the presence of those folks who are navigating the world in such beautiful ways. Where we're going to have a discussion, really talk about some of the challenges through a narrative-based approach into what is homelessness and mental health at the intersections of identity. So I hope that y'all can all take a breath, come join me in this space today as we really reflect and understand what is going on in our community. How can we participate in changing that? And what does it really look like to have conversations with those who have experienced it firsthand? So with that, I'm going to introduce our wonderful panel who brings much more to the table than I can at times. I'm going to start first here with Melvin. Melvin is an artist, an entertainer, fashion model, advocate, and designer from Los Angeles.
I'm from Los Angeles, California. I'm 21 years old. I'm the creative director and founder of Eat Entertainment, which stands for Everything Art Touches. And that has been an awesome journey.
I want to thank Melvin for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, thank you. Our next panelist here is Lorraine. Lorraine experienced homelessness and housing insecurity as a child. And as an adult, they survived domestic violence and left with their children. She then prioritized a healing journey for herself and her family, and now has a career focused on trauma resiliency. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, a bit about me. I am a loving mother of 4 brilliant human beings, and I really appreciate the ability to express creative artistic expression. I am a social justice activist, and I also hold a position with Full Frame Initiative as senior manager, centering community and well-being.
And last but surely not least, we have Dr. Berlin Don. As 25 years of experience in general and special education, she has earned her MA in special education at the University of South Florida and her PhD in education at UCLA. Her dissertation research used as an interactionist framework to examine the cultural construction of learning disabilities and its unintended consequences on inclusion in general education settings. So now we have such an amazing panel and so many questions that we'll go ahead and dive into, and I'm so excited. And I'm gonna give us our first question with Melvin. You know, as we talk about homelessness and thinking of mental health, start us off first. How did homelessness affect your mental well-being?
There's I don't know how I'll put this, phases almost of your mental health. If you are aware that homelessness, that experience is coming for you, you start to think a bit different to try to prepare for when you are finally evicted or your stuff is on the streets and stuff like that. And then there's the way you think when you're actually outside for that first night. And then there's the way you start to think when you adapt it to that situation. And resources and help probably are starting to present themselves, but you've already went through phase 1 and 2, and your emotional state as well has changed, so your trust for these resources and people may be a bit jaded. Then there's the route A and B, depending on if you continue with that experience or if you do accept those resources. When you accept those resources, there are still challenges and consequences. Yeah, trust has been the biggest challenge, just trying to trust everything that's given to me, yeah. I know personally for me, I would like someone who's with me Now in this current position that I'm in with my homelessness and having to do paperwork, I would like someone who's hands-on with me to directly tell me what to put on this stuff.
So, Lorraine, I want to ask you a similar question, and I want you to think, and I want all of us to note, like there are over 66,000 people as of 2020 who are experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles County, right? So thinking of that number in 2020 and understanding the impacts of COVID, and we've all navigated and saw businesses closing, we saw places not available for folks who even experience homelessness to be able to access spaces, right? Thinking of that, Lorraine, how has homelessness affected your mental well-being? And what are some of the things you've had to navigate?
Thank you for those statistics because it grounds us in the reality of how society has been very well practiced in allowing for people to fall through the gaps. And so when I think about my mental health being impacted and coming into the environment of South LA in the 80s when the War on Drugs was released into my community, and it was very intentional to begin to deconstruct the family structure. My dad was constantly being put into the incarceration system. My mom was constantly being pinned up against, do I work or do I take care of my children? And my siblings, who are older than me, were constantly trying to figure out how do they accept a narrative that society has already placed on them and care for this little sister that was just very empathetic, right? I came into this world and I was like, oh, I want everything to be fair and I want everyone to love each other. And other folks were already very well conditioned with like, we gotta have a hard shell because the world is hard. And I was like, I don't wanna be here. This place doesn't feel safe for me. How in the world was I given this family in this environment with the emotional state that I have? I could not figure it out. I spent over 20 years of my life suicidal because I could not figure out how do I, someone who wants everything to be fair and everyone to be loving and everyone to work together, be constantly caught up in a pattern where people were in competition and needing to put the next person down so that they could build themselves up, or to wear this very hard shell so that they could be okay with the way society functioned. And I kept breaking, mentally, breaking. From those moments of laying in the bed and thinking to myself, like, there's something more. There's something different, but I just don't know where it is, and I don't know how to get to it. And then being taught that when you hear gunshots, you just immediately learn how to lay down on the ground because that's the safest way to make it through that moment. My mind could not handle all of that. So my mom struggled a lot with trying to take care of the family by herself. And so as a child, we moved around a lot. And so I had no idea that we were experiencing homelessness. I just knew we bounced around a lot. I just know that I don't remember schools. I just know that I don't have childhood friends because we moved so often. I just know that my dad was in and out of the home a lot, and that the police would drop him off and he would be beaten and bruised, and he would be, the police would tell us, keep him in for the night. I just knew that my mom would one day be joyful and the next be very sorrowful. I just knew that one day my sister would be there and she would be like, let's go out and play, and the next day she was unavailable for me emotionally. I just knew that my brother, my best friend, who was 11 months older than me, was like, Lorraine, let's go out and ride bikes. And then the next moment he was like, it's not safe enough for you to go. And as a child, I was trying to figure out, why am I here when I just want everything to be fair and loving and everyone to work together? So what that looked like for me was in and out of the mental institution because people didn't know what to do. When Lorraine was like, I don't like how this feels. And family around me was like, we don't talk about mental health. We don't go to therapy. We don't do that. You go to church, you pray, and you be relieved. And if not, there's something wrong with you. And so that took a toll. 20 years battling with the constant thought that I didn't belong here and trying to take myself out. And I'm still here today because there's something bigger.
I appreciate that, and I thank you for your vulnerability. I thank both of you for your vulnerability and sharing that as we really bear witness to even thinking of the complexities of race, identity, and the different systems impact that we have on homelessness, right? It doesn't just peak with just waking up one day and not having anything, but it brings so much more to the different layers of that. So, Dawn, I want to ask you, as you think of mental health and you think of some of the myths and the challenges, what are some of the things that you've encountered in your experience and in your narrative?
The number one myth is that I see is that there's an expectation that people look like their story, so we can't make assumptions. The other myth is the assumption that all homeless people have mental health issues and significant issues, and there is that correlation. That leads to the assumption that folks who are homeless or highly mobile aren't able to make decisions for themselves. And that strips them of their autonomy. It strips them of the power to make decisions about their kids and their kids' education. The second myth is that all people with mental health issues are violent and dangerous. And we see that a lot in schools where kids are segregated simply because they're homeless and there's an assumption they're going to have behavior problems. I've seen principals not want to be alone in a meeting with parents who are homeless because there is a fear that there might be explosive behavior and things like that. So all of those assumptions that correlate homelessness and mental health issues with violent and dangerous behavior are just pervasive in the education system, as well as in systems regarding juvenile justice and housing and social supports.
Thank you so much, Don. And you raised something to me that just really speaks so true, right? When we judge a book by its cover, what outcomes, what expectations do we put on that person? And then how does that actually carry into our everyday, right? So if I believe that someone who is homeless, as you were speaking, is going to create a scene and cause a violent experience, then that means every homeless person I see or perceived to be homeless and see, I've now put a stigma on them. And I now carry that with every single person that deems to fit this category, right? So then we continue to say, well, let's isolate folks who experience homelessness. So it's something that we want to keep mindful of when we talk about, what are these narratives, right? So I ask y'all, and we'll start with Melvin. When people say mental health is the cause of homelessness, how do you respond?
Everyone's journey with mental health is personal. I wouldn't say mental health is the cause of it. Because sometimes I was homeless as a kid. I didn't know I was homeless, but I wasn't responsible for it. I just woke up one day and knew we was in a park, and we wasn't leaving the park. And the sun went down, and we were still at the park. And we was wondering when we was leaving the park and when we was going home, but we didn't have a home. So my mental health as a child, I'm still pure. I'm still unaware of all the imaginary laws society has placed on human beings. So in that experience, no. For today, now that I'm older and I've dealt with my time being a human being in this experience, my mental health has become a problem to where people feel like they can't live with me. Because some days I'm just like, yes, proactive. I want to work. I want to be in the studio. I want to make NFTs. I want to create all the time. And then some days it's like, I don't want to be here. Like how she feels. Like I wake up, I look at the news, I get on my phone, and I see how terrible the world is, and I'm fed up, and I want to, I want to leave. So that does create problems within my living situation today. But in the beginning, that wasn't my story. That wasn't my case.
Thank you. Thank you. Lorraine, please, if you can also share with us.
Yeah, I like to attribute homelessness to the impacts of our mental health being stressed and strained. The sheriff knocked on the door and evicted me and my children, while the husband, was the abuser of choice, was away, supposedly working. Me and the children, we headed to the park. I told them we were going on an adventure. And at that time, I was still very hopeful for a moment that we'll figure things out. But yet and still, I still had a lot of trauma bond relationships. So while sitting at the park, having the children play, I was trying to figure out, what do we do next? There's an abandoned building there, and we ended up there. For those first 3 nights, I paced the floor, watching, making sure no one came in, making sure my children were able to sleep. I didn't sleep for 3 days while pacing the floor and envisioning what could our future look like if things were different. And every day we were distracted with like fitting into the construct again. Let me fit back in here because I gotta put this meal on the table. I gotta keep this roof over our head. I gotta go to this work, right? I gotta fit into this. I gotta fit. And even when I'm trying to not fit, my mental health is strained because everyone else is like, look, you're not fitting, without saying it. But they're treating me very different because I'm like, look, I'm courageous enough to get into a space where I'm looking at creativity as a solution to all of the barriers. And folks are saying, yeah, no, that doesn't qualify you for the education system, for the work system, for what we see as like the ideal parent. Get back into the construct. And so my mental health is like constantly looking for ways to be fully expressed. And I'm still trying to figure that out.
I thank you so much for that. I really want everyone to kind of sit with that. So we're talking about mental health not just internally, but we're seeing it externally. So I even ask you, Don, as you think about it as an educator, right, as being in our system, when we think of our students and navigating homelessness, when we think of their accessibility to mental health or the conversations that happen in the classroom, what's going on? What can you tell us about that?
This ties into what Lorraine was just saying about the constructs and the labels we use and the need for kids or adults to have particular labels to access particular services, whether it's a disability label, a mental health label, a homeless label. And instead of focusing on what folks need to be successful, it's what label can we put on them, what box can we put them in so they can access those services. And folks have learned that in order to get what they need, I've worked with students, adults, and even myself, I've learned that to access certain services that I know I need, I might have to say certain things or act a certain way. And, some people say it's gaming the system. No, it's survival. We do what we need to do to survive. And that is because of the way the system is set up.
That is so powerful, right? You must perform in order to obtain the resources to survive. Imagine the challenges of that and how we must navigate our own mental health just to be a part of a system that's not letting us fit in, right? So I think about that as we continue to go upon this journey, really start to allow us to think of how do we involve ourselves in our communities and what do we need to change? So before we do that, I also want to open it up for a Q&A. This will be a great opportunity if you have some dying questions that you want to ask any of our panelists here.
For me, there's been things that I've been able to hang on to just to kind of help hold it together with the stress of 2020, 2021. So in your experiences, what were some of those kind of nuggets of things that kind of help keep you grounded to some degree?
So for me this year, my experience with homelessness, I didn't feel defeated. I felt empowered. I know that's such a strange thing to say, but I felt like something more was to come, and that's because I had hope. And I feel like, honestly, my music is what gave me hope. So it's not easy being a music artist without having a home, because for one, where you're gonna put all your studio equipment now. There's an organization called the Reverence Project. They go by TRP, and they connect me to creative healing projects, resources, and communities. So I will call them every now and then, let them know how I was doing, and they will keep me updated with creative projects, even though I still had to find a normal job and stuff. Just my passion alone is what gave me the hope to feel like this is not gonna last forever. I'm gonna get my own place, I'm gonna get my own job. Yeah, so programs that provide hope, I feel like is very helpful. As long as people have hope, they will continue to fight another day.
I just want to add that absolutely. But when you first started your question, I heard you sort of downplay the challenges you've been experiencing. And I always encourage everyone to respect what their body and their minds are telling them about their own challenges and not compare their situation to others. And, not to say, well, my situation isn't as bad as other people's, so I should be fine. Or to say, well, my housing is secure, so I still have a roof over my head. I'm not living or sleeping rough, as we say. I'm not sleeping on the street, so I shouldn't be stressed out at all because other people have it so much worse. Yes, there's a spectrum of experiences, but we have to respect what our body and mind are telling us, and it's okay to acknowledge the stress we're under and get whatever services or relaxation is accessible to us, to just listen to our bodies and respond to that with care and have grace with ourselves.
I'm gonna have to echo that as well too, because it allows you to then say, if this is how I feel with these resources, then the next layer of that creates more. So it could even tell us a much deeper and explicit story into what is really happening. So I think the work of educating folks to understand that we are people as one is going to be some really critical work that needs to be done so we can move even closer to making this a community effort to end homelessness. Lorraine, is there anything you wanted to add to that question as well too? Like how you've been practicing self-care and what does self-care look like?
Yeah, so self-care to me looks like being with my body, being courageous, and allowing for creativity to be expressed. So real quick, I'd like to share with you all to let's change the default. Let's change the default. See, in the years that I was taught that it was set by default for the hoods to get caught up, and see, that's how I was brought up. And so I put my pain on the side, I took my faith and put it in drive. Let's change the default. Cause yeah, it's a shakedown and I've been laid down, but watch how it come round. Here is my agreement. Breathe in. Breath out. Let's change the default. I won't stop reaching, change makers and seekers. It ain't just me speaking, I'm pleading for peace on the blocks and these streets. For the kids, I got thought, I got heart, I got these. Breathe in. Breath out. Let's change the default. And in the years that I was taught that it was set by default, for the hoods to get caught up and see that's how I was brought up. So I put my pain on the side, I took my faith and put it in drive. Because we all been made new. And there's nothing else to do about it. We're living proof of how the truth will bring the change about us. Rearrange our thinking when love starts to sink in and take away the heartache and the pain. Let's get deeper. Replace it with forgiveness. Man, I hope I get this. Realign the purpose and see a whole new vision. Maybe start my own business. Living is so relentless when you knowing what your worth is and you see the tables turning. See, don't trip up on the haters. Tell them you see them later. And don't worry about who tripping. Just stay focused on ambition and walk into the favor as you step into the season, knowing everything happens for a reason. Let's change the default.
There are no words left to say, as you have said all that is needed to be said. Thank you so very much.
So I've been doing this 22 years, and I'm still learning. So thank you for taking a huge step today in your learning. It's our mission to continue to bring these amazing human beings to you in any shape or form, whether it's in the streets with us in outreach, whether it's being guided on this amazing journey with Martel. But the value of human life is presented to us every day, and how we evaluate that value, right? It's not up to the politicians. They can do whatever they want. It's up to us as leaders in our community, as parents, as the future of our nation, to acknowledge the humanity. We are focused on flipping the narrative around poverty. Who can say that they could have survived the challenges that they did with such grace and heroism? I'm standing here saying that I'm not sure I could have without cracking. So we, at the end of the day, want to make poverty relatable to all of us because we are the agents of change, but it's as individuals. And our overarching theme, they are us, is no more stridently on display than in the lives of these four human beings. And I said three because these three folks lived and thrive now because of the experiences that they had living on our streets. There's 66,000 is undercounted by about 20%. So there are many people just like this looking for that next hope, right? We can give that to them as individuals and how we treat each other, right, every day, and how we now look at these folks that are living out amongst us with a different set of optics. And if we've given that to you today, then we've done our job. I want to thank the panel once again. Martel, amazing job. Thank you, my friend. And on our three experts. All right? Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.